The day my ex-husband screamed that I had ruined his life, I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, calm on the outside, even though my heart was pounding. Because deep down, I knew this moment was coming, and maybe, just maybe, he deserved it. Stay with me while I tell you exactly what happened, and if my story stirs something in you, remember to stick around, share it with someone you care about, and keep following for more. I live in a small town in Ohio. My name is Hannah Mitchell, I'm 34, and my whole world revolves around my 10-year-old son, Ethan. For years, I tried to make my marriage to Mark Turner work. Mark was 37, always well-dressed, always concerned about how people saw him. He loved being the man with the perfect family, the perfect house, the perfect image. Behind closed doors, though, he could be cold and controlling. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Mark said he was looking for stamps in my desk drawer, but I knew he liked to snoop. That's when he found it, an old envelope with a folded medical report inside. I didn't even remember keeping it. It showed Ethan's blood type, and apparently, it didn't match Mark's. I heard the sound of paper crumpling, then heavy footsteps. He came into the living room, face red, jaw tight. "What the hell is this, Hannah?" He waved the paper in front of me like it was a court summons. "Ethan isn't mine? You've been lying to me for 10 years. My stomach dropped. "Mark, it's not what you think," I said, but he was already pacing. "Don't you dare tell me it's not what I think," he shouted. "Who is he? Who's the real father?" I took a deep breath. "His name is Ryan Carter. I dated him briefly before I met you. I didn't even know I was pregnant until after we started seeing each other. You told me you wanted to raise Ethan as your own. You said it didn't matter. That was before you robbed me of my real family," he spat. His voice was full of disgust, as if the last 10 years had been some elaborate scam I'd pulled on him. "I'm filing for divorce. Tomorrow. And everyone will know what you did." For a moment, I just sat there, stunned by how quickly he'd gone from husband to stranger. I thought about all the nights I stayed up late making his favorite dinners, all the times I defended him when people said he was arrogant, all the ways I'd tried to keep our family together for Ethan's sake. And none of it mattered. Mark stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Ethan was in his room, unaware that his whole life was about to change. I sat there, staring at that crumpled medical report in my hand, and I knew this was only the beginning of a storm that would test every part of me. When I think back to my marriage with Mark, the cracks were there from the very beginning. I just chose to ignore them. He carried himself like the world owed him something. At first, I mistook that confidence for charm, but it didn't take long to realize it was arrogance. He took control of every dollar that came into the house, insisting it was easier if he handled the bills. But in reality, it was about power. If I wanted to buy something as small as a pair of shoes, I had to check with him first. It wasn't just money. Slowly, he started cutting me off from people I cared about. If I made plans with my friends, he'd find a way to guilt me into canceling, claiming I was neglecting my family. My best friend, Emily, used to call often, but Mark's cold comments about her being a bad influence made me stop inviting her over. Before I knew it, my world had shrunk down to him, Ethan, and the walls of our house. When Ethan started school, I hoped Mark would be the type of dad who showed up proudly to watch him in plays or baseball game. But if an event clashed with his golf schedule, he wouldn't even consider rearranging. "Golf is my stress relief," he'd say, as if his son's milestones were optional. I remember sitting alone in the school auditorium during Ethan's first-grade play, smiling for Ethan's sake while feeling that sharp sting of disappointment in my chest. The worst part was how Mark treated me. He had a way of turning every conversation into a critique. If I made dinner, he'd comment on how his mother's roast chicken never came out this dry. If I gained a few pounds, he'd casually mention how women should take care of themselves if they want to keep their husband's attention. And if I ever talked about going back to school or starting a small business, he'd actually laugh, and say I should focus on the things I'm good at, like laundry and grocery shopping. We weren't fighting all the time, but that didn't mean we were happy. Our marriage became like a silent, airless room. No passion, no warmth, just routine. I told myself that staying was the right thing for Ethan. He adored Mark, and in his young eyes, Mark was a hero. I couldn't bear the thought of shattering that illusion so I stayed. I swallowed my hurt, bit back my comebacks, and kept the peace. Every time I thought about leaving, I'd picture Ethan's face and convince myself to give it just a little longer. I thought maybe Mark would change, or maybe I'd get used to the way things were. But the truth was, our marriage had been hollow for years, and all it took was one discovery to make that emptiness impossible to ignore. The day Mark told me to get out, there was no warning, no chance to prepare. He came home from work, tossed my suitcase onto the couch, and told me I had until the end of the night to be gone. His voice was calm in that cold, calculated way he had when he wanted to hurt me most. "You and your little secret can find somewhere else to live," he said. Ethan was upstairs, and my stomach twisted at the thought of him hearing any of this. I packed in silence, my hands shaking as I tried to figure out where we would even go. Rachel, my older sister, answered on the first ring when I called. I didn't have to explain much, just that Ethan and I needed a place to stay. She told me to come right away, no questions asked. When I went to get Ethan, I found Mark in his room, crouched down so they were eye level. His tone was low but sharp. You know, Ethan, your mom tricked me. She made me think you were mine when you're really some other guy's kid. I raised you all these years, and she lied to both of us. I froze in the doorway, horrified. Ethan looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. That's not true, I said, stepping between them, but Mark just stood up and walked out, satisfied with the damage he'd done. That night at Rachel's, Ethan barely spoke. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, twisting the hem of his shirt in his hand. Mom, he finally said, did you lie to Dad? His voice was small, like he didn't want the answer. My chest ached. I told him the truth, that I hadn't known I was pregnant when I met Mark, that Mark had promised to raise him as his own, and that nothing about who his biological father was made me love him any less. But I could see he was still confused, still hurt. Over the next few days, Ethan withdrew into himself. He didn't want to go outside, didn't laugh at Rachel's silly jokes, and avoided looking at me for too long. At night, I could hear him tossing in bed. I knew Mark's words had planted seeds of doubt in his mind, and it broke me knowing my son felt like a burden in a fight he never asked for. When I met with my lawyer, Paul Jennings, he listened carefully and then sighed. Hannah, I need you to prepare yourself. Mark's not going to stop at divorce. He's going to go for full custody, not because he cares about Ethan's well-being, but because it's the best way to hurt you. The idea of losing Ethan, even part-time, made my skin crawl. I knew Mark would twist the truth, and I knew this was only the beginning of a battle that would test every ounce of strength I had left. The custody battle started almost as soon as the divorce papers were filed. Mark's lawyer wasted no time painting me as the villain. In his version of events, I wasn't just a bad wife. I was an unfit mother who had deceived him and, by extension, ruined Ethan's life. Every court appearance felt like stepping into a boxing ring, where only one of us was allowed to throw punches, and Mark was swinging for my reputation. He sat there in his perfectly tailored suit, speaking about me like I was some stranger off the street who'd tricked him into fatherhood. He emphasized the word lied every chance he got, as if repeating it often enough would make it the only truth that mattered. In reality, I was holding it together by a thread. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing his lawyer dissect my life like it was a case study in betrayal, made my stomach churn. But I kept my expression calm. My lawyer, Paul Jennings, had warned me early on. If you react, they'll use it against you. Stay composed no matter what. So I did. I smiled politely, answered questions with steady tones, and refused to give Mark the satisfaction of watching me crumble. Paul, however, wasn't just sitting back. While Mark's team tried to drag my character through the mud, Paul quietly dug into Mark's finance, and what he found made my jaw drop. There was a bank account in the Cayman Islands, one Mark had never mentioned during our marriage, holding more money than I'd seen in my entire life. On top of that, there was income from a property sale that he hadn't reported anywhere, not to me, not to the IRS, and definitely not to the court. When Paul showed me the documents, I felt two things, shock and the faintest spark of hope. This, he said, tapping the papers, isn't just a smoking gun, it's an entire arsenal. But we can't use it yet. Timing is everything. I understood. If we threw it out too soon, Mark's lawyer would have time to twist it, spin it, or bury it in legal excuses. For now, it was our secret weapon, tucked away while I endured hearing Mark call me irresponsible, unstable, and manipulative. The worst part was knowing Ethan was caught in the middle. Every hearing meant days of tension at home, whispers between me and Paul that I tried to keep out of earshot, and the constant worry about how much of this mess would trickle down to him. Still, I held on to the thought of those financial records like a lifeline. Mark had spent weeks trying to convince the court that I was the one who couldn't be trusted. Soon, we'd have proof that the man calling himself the victim was hiding skeletons of his own, and they were far uglier than anything he accused me of. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Ethan finally asked the question I'd been dreading. We were sitting at Rachel's kitchen table, the smell of tomato soup filling the air, when he put his spoon down and looked at me with eyes far older than his 10 years. "Mom," he said quietly, "why did you lie to Dad?" The words hit me harder than I expected. My first instinct was to say I didn't, but I could see in his face that a quick denial wouldn't be enough. He needed the whole truth, even if it was messy. I took a deep breath. "Ethan, when I met your dad, I didn't know I was pregnant. I had been dating someone named Ryan before him, and when I found out I was going to have you, Mark told me it didn't matter. He said he wanted to be your dad, that he loved me, and that we would raise you together." Ethan's brow furrowed. So, he knew the whole time? Yes, I said, nodding slowly. From the very beginning. I never hid you from him, and I never thought it was a lie. You've always been my truth, Ethan. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. He looked down at his soup again, stirring it even though he wasn't eating. It doesn't feel like that right now, he whispered. It feels like I'm a problem, like I'm the reason you and Dad are fighting. My heart broke right there at that table. I reached across and held his hand, feeling how small and warm it was in mine. Ethan, listen to me, I said firmly. You are not the reason for any of this. None of it is your fault. Adults make choices, and sometimes those choices hurt people they love. But you, I squeezed his hand gently, you are never a problem. You are my son, and I would walk through fire for you. His eyes filled with tears, and he blinked quickly, trying to hide them. But everyone's so mad. Dad says things, you say things. I just wish it would stop. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. I wish it would stop too, I murmured into his hair. But until it does, I promise you this. I will protect you. No matter what happens in court, no matter what Dad says, you'll always have me. Always. He hugged me back, his small body pressing into mine like he was trying to disappear into safety. In that moment, I realized this battle wasn't just about custody or proving my innocence. It was about making sure Ethan never forgot he was loved, even when the world around him was falling apart. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered, "Thanks, Mom," before drifting off to sleep. I sat beside him for a long time, watching him breathe, silently vowing that Mark could take my house, my money, even my reputation, but he would never take my son's sense of worth. It was a Saturday morning when Rachel came into the kitchen with a look on her face that told me she'd heard something I needed to know. She sat down across from me, lowering her voice even though we were the only ones in the house. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "I ran into Megan at the grocery store. You remember her? She used to work with Mark's company's accounting team. Well, she told me something. I braced myself. She said Mark was having an affair with a woman named Lisa Howard. Apparently, it started while you two were still married. I felt my stomach twist. Mark had spent weeks in court dragging my name through the mud, acting like I'd committed the ultimate betrayal. And here he was, having done exactly what he accused me of, but worse, because he had known the truth about Ethan from the start. The anger simmered for a full day before I decided to call him. When he picked up, his voice was as smug as ever. "What do you want, Hannah?" "I know about Lisa," I said flatly. There was silence for a beat, then a low chuckle. "Oh, that? Please. That's different," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It happened after the damage was done. You'd already lied to me for years. I deserved better." I almost laughed at how twisted his logic was. "So you think cheating is fine as long as you can justify it in your head?" "It's not cheating if the marriage was already over," he replied casually. "Besides, Lisa actually appreciated me, something you never did." I hung up before I said something that would make me regret losing my temper. But inside, my decision was made. He'd built his entire case around portraying me as dishonest and immoral, and now I had proof that he was the one with dirty hands. I called Paul, my lawyer, and told him everything Rachel had heard. He didn't even hesitate. "We can subpoena his workplace records and communication log. If there's anything between him and this Lisa Howard, we'll find it. Combined with the financial evidence we already have, it'll paint a very different picture for the judge." That afternoon, Paul filed a motion to introduce the affair and Mark's hidden finances into the court proceedings. We already knew the offshore account and undeclared property sale would hurt him, but adding proof of infidelity during our marriage? That would rip apart his entire devoted husband image. For weeks, Mark had been trying to make me look like the only one at fault, the sole reason our family fell apart. Now the truth was coming for him, cold, hard, and backed by documents that couldn't be spun into another one of his self-serving stories. And for the first time in months, I felt the tiniest shift in the balance of power. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom felt colder than usual. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Paul, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Mark sat stiffly in his expensive navy suit, his jaw tight, eyes fixed forward like he already knew he was walking into trouble but refused to admit it. Paul began by methodically presenting the evidence we'd been holding back. First came the offshore account, screenshots of statements from a Cayman Islands bank, with Mark's name clearly printed at the top. The room went so quiet I could hear the shuffle of paper as the judge leaned forward to read them. Next was the undeclared income from the property sale. Paul explained in plain terms how Mark had sold a commercial lot for nearly $200,000 without reporting a single cent to the IRS, or to me during our marriage. And then came the final blow, the affair. Paul submitted email records and travel receipts, showing that Mark and Lisa Howard had taken several business trips together, most of which coincided with weekends, when I'd been left at home with Ethan. The proof was irrefutable, and for the first time since this battle began, Mark's confident mask cracked. Mark's lawyer tried to object, claiming the affair was irrelevant to custody. But the judge raised a hand. "It speaks to the witness's credibility," she said firmly. "And credibility is central when we're talking about a child's best interests." Paul didn't stop there. He brought in testimony from Rachel and Ethan's teacher, who described how withdrawn Ethan had become after overhearing arguments and being told damaging things about me. Piece by piece, the image of Mark as a stable, trustworthy parent unraveled. When it was Mark's turn to testify, he grew defensive, raising his voice when questioned about the offshore account. "It's my money. I earned it," he barked. The judge's expression hardened, and I could see her taking in every aggressive tone, every attempt to dodge a direct question. By the end of the hearing, the shift in the room was palpable. The judge took a short recess, then returned with her decision. I would have primary custody of Ethan. Mark's visitation would be limited to supervised weekends until he could demonstrate a stable and supportive environment. Relief washed over me so suddenly I almost couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a win, it was protection for my son. Mark didn't share my relief. As we left the courtroom, he leaned in close enough that I could smell his aftershave. His voice was low, sharp. "You'll regret this, Hannah. I promise you." I didn't answer. I just kept walking, clutching the court papers like a shield. His threats didn't matter anymore. The judge had seen the truth, and for the first time in months, the law was on my side. Hannah had kept quiet for months, letting Mark believe he had outsmarted her in the divorce. He had walked away with the bigger share of their assets, kept their former home, and flaunted his new life online. But what Mark didn't know was that Hannah had stumbled upon something dangerous. Financial records he had carelessly left in a shared cloud folder. While scrolling through the files one night, Hannah's stomach twisted. There were bank statements from offshore accounts, suspicious wire transfers, and thousands of dollars in unreported cash deposits. She knew Mark had always been shady with money, but this was beyond careless. It was criminal. Instead of confronting him, she decided to bide her time. Quietly, she gathered every file, every spreadsheet, every suspicious receipt. She printed hard copies and saved backups to an encrypted drive. The longer she looked, the more certain she became that Mark had been evading taxes for years. One rainy afternoon, Hannah walked into a small cafe with her laptop and a burner email account. She composed a short, precise message to the IRS, attaching the damning evidence. She hit send and walked out, heart pounding, not entirely sure if she had just ruined his life or saved her own. Weeks passed in silence. Then news trickled back to her through mutual friends. The IRS had opened an official investigation into Mark's finance. His business partners were furious. Clients began pulling contracts. His once pristine reputation was crumbling. When the IRS agents eventually showed up at his office, it was over. Mark's company, desperate to save its own skin, forced him to resign immediately. For the first time, Hannah felt the weight of his financial shadow lift from her shoulders. She didn't celebrate publicly. She didn't need to. Her revenge wasn't about loud victories. It was about freedom. With the small savings she had carefully tucked away during their marriage, she found a modest but cozy home for herself and her son. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs, free from Mark's influence and debts. On the day they moved in, Ethan helped her carry in boxes. They sat on the living room floor eating pizza straight from the box, laughing about how echoey the space was without furniture. Hannah looked at her son, at the fresh paint on the walls, and felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. Mark had taken so much from her, but she had taken something back. Her independence, her peace, and her ability to protect her future. She hadn't needed to scream or fight. She had let the truth do the damage. And as for Mark, he was left picking up the pieces of a life built on lies. Hannah never reached out, never gloated, never admitted what she had done. She didn't have to. The silence was victory enough. Ethan's life had been a whirlwind in the months following his father Mark's passing. The hurt from his father's absence during his formative years, compounded by the recent loss, had left him feeling unmoored. Hannah, his mother, knew the healing wouldn't happen overnight, but she also believed in her son's quiet resilience. One Saturday morning, she noticed him lingering near the local baseball field, watching kids his age practice. Hannah had seen that spark before. Ethan used to love tossing a ball around with Mark before things fell apart. The next day, she signed him up for a community league. At first, Ethan was hesitant, joining the team but keeping to himself. But with each practice, his shoulders straightened a little more. The crack of the bat, the cheer of the coach, and the rhythm of the game gave him something to look forward to. Slowly, the boy who'd been so guarded began laughing with his teammates and running the bases with a glint of joy in his eyes. It was during this fragile but hopeful time that Hannah received an unexpected message. A man named Ryan Carter introduced himself as Ethan's biological father. He explained that they had mutual acquaintances who'd told him about Ethan's recent struggles. Ryan was clear. He wasn't trying to replace Mark, but he wanted to be a positive presence if Ethan and Hannah were open to it. Hannah was cautious. She'd worked hard to shield Ethan from disappointment, but after some thought, she decided to give Ryan a chance, under her watchful eye. She told Ethan about Ryan's message, and after a few quiet minutes, Ethan agreed to meet him. Their first meeting was awkward. Ryan was nervous, Ethan was reserved, and Hannah kept a close eye on both. But when Ryan asked if Ethan liked fishing, something shifted. Ethan's eyes lit up. It was one of the few things he still loved doing with Mark. Ryan admitted he'd grown up fishing on lakes and rivers, and invited Ethan to join him the following week. That fishing trip became a turning point. Out on the water, away from the pressure of conversation, they found an easy rhythm. Ryan taught Ethan a few tricks he'd learned over the years, and Ethan proudly reeled in a bass, grinning from ear to ear. It wasn't about replacing anyone, it was about creating something new, a bond that could stand on its own. Over the following months, Ethan's life began to feel steadier. He had his baseball team, his mother's unwavering support, and now, another adult who genuinely cared about his happiness. Hannah watched from the sidelines, both on the baseball field and in life, as her son laughed more freely and carried himself with quiet confidence. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer defined him. Ethan was building something new, step by step, a future where love, trust, and hope had room to grow again. Mark stood on Hannah's porch, his once confident posture replaced by the slouched shoulders of a man beaten by life. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes sunken, and the smug arrogance he used to wear like a crown had dissolved into bitterness. He clutched the doorframe with trembling hands, as if he needed it to keep himself from collapsing. "Hannah," he began, voice rough and desperate, "we need to talk. One last time." Hannah hesitated for only a moment before opening the door halfway. "You have 5 minutes." Mark's words spilled out like poison. "You ruined me. You and your precious Ethan. You think I don't know what people say about me now? That I'm a fool? That I lost everything because of you?" His tone was sharp, but beneath it was a thread of panic, the sound of someone who couldn't accept the truth. Hannah crossed her arms. "Mark, you didn't lose everything because of me. You lost it because of yourself, your greed, your cruelty. You treated everyone like they were beneath you, even the people who loved you. That's not fair," he snapped. "You lied to me about Ethan's paternity. You humiliated me." Her voice stayed calm, measured. "Ethan's paternity wasn't what destroyed you. It was your obsession with appearances, your arrogance, your inability to take responsibility. You would rather burn down your own life than admit you were wrong." Mark's face twisted, a mixture of shame and defiance. "You think you're better than me?" "No," Hannah replied, her voice firm. "I know I am, because I chose to heal instead of hate. You chose to blame instead of change." She could see in his eyes that he was searching for something, an opening, a sliver of sympathy, but there was none left for him to take. When he started to speak again, she didn't wait to hear it. She closed the door mid-sentence, the sharp click of the latch echoing through the quiet hallway. For the first time in years, she didn't feel guilt. She didn't feel the old pull to explain herself or justify her choices. All she felt was relief. Hannah walked to the back of the house, where sunlight streamed through the glass door. Outside, Ethan was running across the yard, his laughter spilling into the air like music. His cheeks were flushed, his hair messy from playing, and when he turned to wave at her, his smile was pure and unburdened. She smiled back, her chest warm with the kind of peace she had once thought impossible. Mark was a closed chapter now, a story she no longer needed to reread. And as she stepped outside to join her son, she knew she had finally, completely moved on. "Do you think I made the right choice by cutting him out of my life completely, or should I have given him a chance to fix the mess he created?" Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your take. And if you enjoy stories of betrayal, karma, and redemption, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.